I've had many customers running both the 300 series and the 500 series latex experience some difficulties running paper. Now, to be fair to latex, the latex printers can print on virtually any kind of paper. I run very inexpensive uncoated bond. I run offset coated papers of all kinds. I run papers as thick as 12-point cardstock. I run resin-coated papers. I run aqueous-coated papers. I run solvent-coated papers. I run papers with nano coatings. There's not many types of paper that cannot go through a Gen 3 latex printer. So we are printing on this exceedingly wide selection of papers. And almost all of those papers will work. There's a few exceptions you might run into with unique types of coatings where the coating is not very compatible with latex. But for the most part, you can get all of those papers to work. The question is, at what speed, with how much ink, and at what temperature? That's very critical to understanding how paper is going to be successful through a latex printer. What I have here is an example of some issues that we encountered recently with a media. Now, this particular media is the SIL 3686 Trisol. And if you look here, right in the middle, right there, and a little bit going forward, you have little scratches. Now, I watched the print very carefully, and I know those scratches did not come from the print zone. This was printed on a 500 series, and I know that the print zone did not cause it because I'm watching the print zone, and I have the proofing light on. Everything is perfect. These were coming from inside the curing area, which is a little tough to see sometimes on a 500 series because even if you open up the door, you can't quite see what's going on in there as well as you can in, say, a 300 series. But it looked to me, based on what I could see, that the media is coming up in the center and it is rubbing inside the curing tunnel. The way I solved this is I lowered the temperature. The temperature was set from a certified download just a little too warm. Now, if you put it on a take-up reel for this particular media, the take-up reel pulled the media a little flatter and this didn't occur. So it only occurred when you were printing back towards the pinch rollers, and then as the media comes out the front, the very first part of the print was having the little scratches. As the print went forward, as the weight of the material held it down, the scratches weren't there. But if you were to load a brand new roll in and send a job over, you would conclude that there's something wrong with the preset. And for what you would be doing, the answer would be there was. It was a little too warm, with potentially a little too much ink, and that combination of heat and ink, or in a sense the water, which is the delivery system for the ink, causes it to come up just a little bit too much. What I did is I lowered the temperature by about 10, 12 degrees, and then I slowed it down just a little bit with an interpass delay, and I reduced the amount of ink. Those three simple things allowed it to lay a little flatter, go through there without any trouble. No more scratches. Put it on the take-up reel, no scratches. So with and without the take-up reel, everything ran fine. So we've placed a new preset on the HP Media Locator that runs at just a little bit lower of a temperature. You could do the same thing. The reason I'm explaining this is because I want to explain the methodology or the reasoning behind what we did to fix this. Almost all paper-related, let's call them disappointments, are because you're running too fast, with too much heat, with too much ink. I start all paper at 12 pass, and then I usually start at about 190 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I'll try to see how much ink it can take. The thicker the paper, the less it's going to be conductive, and you may need some more heat. The good news is, the thicker the paper, usually it can take a little more heat. If you have too much heat and too much temperature, or excuse me, too much heat and too much ink, what I usually find is right in the center of the paper, it will tend to come up a little bit. You'll have a little pocket, and that pocket will cause the edge of the front of the carriage to scrape against it, and you'll get this little bit of carriage kind of scrape, and it will ruin the print. The solution to that is always to lower the temperature and then reduce the amount of ink. If you reduce the amount of ink too much, then your print looks underwhelming. So you want to keep it up high enough. Usually I don't like to go under 80%. If I can get to 90 or 100%, that's wonderful. I will take a slightly slower print with a little interpass delay with a controlled lower temperature at 100% over one at 80%. That's a little faster because I really want the quality on the paper. But those are judgments. And the coating on the paper can always affect how much color pop or how resonant the image can be. A good coated paper at 80% might look as good or better than a inferior coated product at 100% density. Those things are very subjective depending on the paper, and there's so many different types of paper out there. The reason I want to explain this process is because there's so many papers, I'd like the operators and the end users and our customers to feel comfortable adjusting the settings to dial in a paper, starting at 12 pass at about 190 degrees Fahrenheit, and then testing different ink combinations. I also routinely will use interpass delay to really dial things in. That sort of gives me a tremendous control of the media. But if necessary, I'm going to lower that temperature, use the interpass delay to compensate, and try to avoid having to reduce the ink. But if I have to, I have to. Sometimes you can see very clearly, watching the pocketing in the center, that at 100% density, it's going to pocket. And you can't bring the temperature low enough to stop it. But the minute you go to 90, it stops. Because you have just a little less water, and that combination of heat and water is more ideal, and the paper prints perfectly. I'm going to make a series of videos on paper, but what I've addressed here is I really think the core understanding of how to control paper, it applies to the 300 series and it applies to the 500 series. First, you have to get control of your temperature. You have to consider how much ink can the paper take at that temperature, and I always start at 12 pass to establish the slowest I'm willing to go. There are some papers where I will go to 16 pass if necessary, and there's other papers where I can run as fast as 6 pass because the coating on it is so good that it prevents the paper from buckling or cockling, even if you put some heat on it and even if you put some ink on it. Papers are very different. There's a lot of papers out there. So be aware of these principles because they will apply especially with a lot of offset type papers, and they'll allow you to be a lot more successful on a variety of papers, including a lot of very inexpensive offset papers.